Only here in a few days, we're going to get the best syzygy, the best new moon or full moon of the summer with the arrival of a Cancer new moon here on the 29th of June. And it's all summer. If you break down which syzygies are coming down the way, this is the best one. And so that's what the video is about. We're going to look at the syzygies coming up and we're going to break down the chart of this new moon in Cancer. So here it is. You can look at the chart of the new moon here coming right up. You've got the 8th degree of Cancer exactly square Jupiter in the 8th degree of Aries. And so it's this exact touch with Jupiter, something we love as astrologers and we love in the traditional system. And this moon is in a mutual reception with Jupiter by exaltation ruler, because the exaltation ruler of Cancer is Jupiter and the exaltation ruler of Aries is the Sun. And so there's this lovely mutual reception between Jupiter and the Sun in this chart. As the moon's refreshed here, 29 June 2020, 4:52 in Central Europe. This is the major chart I'm going to talk about later. We'll break it down in detail, but I just want to list the syzygies that we're going to unfold here this summer. And I think you'll agree with me when we break those down that this is the best one. This is the one to kind of lean into if you're doing syzygy magic, new moon, full moon, lunation cycle magic. I would consider this one as maybe a celebration of Jupiter, really leaning into that Jupiterian. So up next after this new moon in Cancer arrives on 13 July, a full moon in Capricorn. While this chart is actually nice, it was one I was thinking about. We have a Capricorn moon, which is the exile of the moon. It's very close to Pluto, which might intensify that Capricorn nature of the moon and feeling separate and feeling kind of disconnected in a way that's unique to Capricorn moons. But this full moon is nice. It's averse to Mars and Saturn and the nodes. And so that has a value with this moon. The next syzygy is a new moon in Leo in the 6th degree of Leo, which will be by sign opposite Saturn, a wide orb with that Saturn opposition, Saturn in Aquarius. But it's getting close to a square with Mars, and it's a sign-based overcoming square from Mars and Taurus, about 10 degrees of the orb. And so this is now building in this summer fixed T-square or grand cross if you want to include the South Node in Scorpio. This is a rougher energy, this new moon, and it kicks off a lunation where you have two syzygies, a new moon and a full moon, which are both very closely configured to Saturn and Mars. And so this is going to be followed by a 12 August full moon that is 3 degrees roughly from Saturn. So Saturn is in Aquarius. The full moon in Aquarius is very closely configured. It's just under 3 degrees. And in this chart, Mars is at 25 degrees of Taurus, squaring this full moon. And so this full moon really does get roughed up by a Mars and Saturn square. And then the Sun brings in a T-square and the South Node a grand cross, with some of the most difficult energy. So this moment between the new moon in Leo late July and then the full moon in Aquarius mid-August is really some of the most difficult energy of the summer. I've been saying already, plan around this. Plan around this, hunker down, get back to your protective spaces by that last week of July and sort of ride this out, because the astrology starts getting really intense here in August. So then we have a 27 August new moon in Virgo, which you might think comes as a break because we're now out of the fixed axis, where the lunar nodes in Saturn are and where Mars was. But the thing is, Mars has led the way here, has ingressed into Gemini by this time, 7 days before this new moon, and is an exact overcoming square to this new moon in Virgo. Mars is in the 5th degree or 4 degrees of Gemini, the syzygy, the new moon, the 5th degree of Virgo or 4 degrees of Virgo. So that exact overcoming square for Mars. I think this is when the Mars retrograde stories will really start kicking off. The transaction of facts will emerge that are going to define that Mars retrograde story. Even though this is before shadow, remember, a transit begins when a planet ingresses into the sign. That story of the energy of the planet mixing with that sign and the ruler of that sign begins right upon the ingress. But because this is fused with a syzygy, I think this is really when we might kick off some of those transactions. So look for 27 August and this a new moon in Virgo. Then we close the summer with a 10 September full moon in Pisces. Not a bad chart. It is about 6 degrees, a separating square from Mars in Gemini. And so these two mutable syzygies, this lunation cycle with two mutable syzygies, while Mars is in Gemini, does to me kick off the Mars and Gemini story, which is a whole separate issue. I'm going to be breaking it down in another video at some point. But for our lives and our charts, it's like the mutable activation really does hit here late August, early September with these syzygies and Mars squaring them. So I think you'll agree with me that this upcoming new moon in Cancer, very closely partile square with Jupiter, strong in Aries, mutually received by the sun in Cancer as it seeds the moon with power. Probably the best syzygy of the summer. Use it. I've been on this channel, my main theme has been enjoy June, best astrology of the year, early July, still some lingering powerful astrology, but then we enter into this sort of intense fixed T-square right in between the two eclipse seasons, which are of fixed T-squares, because Saturn's in Aquarius when you have the nodes in Taurus, Scorpio. So let's break down the new moon in Cancer chart. I want to talk about it a little bit more. One thing to say right off the bat is you'll have 4 planets in the sign of their domicile, 4 dignified planets, the moon, Mercury in Gemini, the moon in Cancer, Mars in Aries, and Saturn in Aquarius. And then you have the sun and Jupiter in a mutual reception by exaltation. That covers every planet here except Venus. Venus, which doesn't have an exaltation or rulership dignity, but is in a mutual reception by Egyptian term with Jupiter. And so the two benefics are mutually receiving each other in that beautiful sextile from Gemini and Aries by that Egyptian term reception. So love it. I love that every planet has some really nice dignity and configurations here. And you just break it down further, you can see the opportunities. You've got the Cancer, the initiations of the water sign, blending with the initiations of the fire energy in a lovely mutual reception. Fire and water can go so well together. We burst out in passion. We need to refresh and cool down with water. And so I think that we can fuel our actions using this energy with the fire and water blends that can be so potent and so healing, and then give us rest and rejuvenation and cleansing so we can then push out even further. Remember, this is the best moment of the year in terms of, I think, getting things done and enjoying life. And just let me say on that, every chart's different, okay? When, as a reader on YouTube, I mean, there's a sense of a general reading here, but every chart breaks down a little bit differently. I've seen some charts this week that really don't have anything in the fixed signs. And so those fixed activations later in the year aren't really hitting them as dynamically. But the world, I think we can see it already with this year, with the difficulties in the world, that we have this fixed activation bringing difficulty. Even if our personal charts aren't going to be as affected, we have to deal with the mundane effects and other people's lives being affected. And that in and of itself is a unique challenge. But just to come back here, so you've got lovely configurations in this chart. Saturn is averse to the luminaries. Saturn is sextiling and trining the other traditional planets. So Saturn's doing no damage here. Mars gets support from Jupiter, sextiles from Venus. And that mitigates greatly these overcoming square, which is wide in orb to the new moon. So a lovely, lovely chart. One thing I wanted to do just to break down Cancer energy as we're kicking off a lunation here, the new lunar month. I want to turn to Dane Rudhyar, my favorite astrologer maybe, to talk about synology and the archetypes of signs. Rudhyar's pretty clear when he breaks down Cancer. He says it's a complex energy. It's often misunderstood. I've seen on Twitter this week a lot of people saying, don't tweet anymore about emotions in Cancer, and that's fine. I think that is one component of it, but certainly it's way deeper than that. Cancer is the rising sign in the Thema Mundi, the theoretical birth chart of the universe, for a reason. Rudhyar here in his book, The Pulse of Life, available online for free, my favorite Signology book. He says here that so few persons have understood the mystery of the symbol of Cancer. And then he goes in to say a creature of the sea. And the sea always symbolizes the collective, or rather the generic unconscious, the universal matrix of life. And I love this about Cancer, if we think about it as like Mother Gaia, or the matrix energy, or the sophionic birthing of reality in this realm, if you want to go Gnostic. Cancer is very much about the matrix that underlies all things. The substrate of reality that we're birthed out from and into. And so it's very powerful energy. To have a new moon here that's auspiciously configured to Jupiter, maybe the best of the summer, think about what you are birthing, your own creative powers. Think about what you've been birthed into and how you want to engage this kind of primal creative energy of existence. That's a major theme in this moment, especially with Jupiter so closely configured. Jupiter, a planet of generative power, signifies the cells of reproduction. So spermazoa and ovum, that's all Jupiter. And it's dynamically configured with this new moon, mother of reality, Cancer. What are you generating now? What are you doing with this wonderful energy to set yourself up for the rest of the year and just enjoy life, enjoy the pure joy of creative reality? And then one more thing I want to close with from Rudyard. He says Cancer is the symbol of fecundation. I've never really heard that word, fecundity I like, but fecundation. But will it be a divine or a strictly human fecundation? Cancer is man in the God-impregnated state, a holy place in which God has descended. So it's very much a religious notion here, that it's the birth of reality itself, and it's quite profound. And I just think about using your own creative powers in a godlike way to you're creating your reality in some ways. We all are, with our thoughts, with our choices day to day. So use this Cancer new moon well, seed your reality, and very much enjoy this lunation, this lunar month where this Cancer new moon is the kickoff.